In college, a friend said to me one time, once you've believed in God, even for just a moment, there's really never going back. Once you've believed in God for even just one moment, there's really never, ever any going back, really. Um, and I take that to mean that maybe there comes a time when you think that God doesn't exist, but once you've had that initial feeling that God is there, um, you really could never mean it. And that stuck with me. That has stayed with me. I've never stopped thinking about it. I don't know if that's right or not, or if it's true or not for everybody or for all people or what, but it has always bothered me, and I have thought about it to this day. I was 18. I'm 35 years old today. So that's almost half of my life ago, and I have never forgotten it. And in my own life, I must tell you that it is generally true. Not only have I never been able to escape believing in God and believing that God is there, and when I say God, I know that everybody in here has a different concept of what God is, or who, or where, or why, or how God is. So let's just all agree that we're speaking about something that is good and great and bigger than all of us, a creator. For myself in my life, having believed in God, I have never been able to stop it. Although I think that there was a time in my life when I had fooled myself into believing that God was not there. So I grew up Catholic, and I have no beef with the Catholic Church. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have major disagreements. But I should say that I still miss Mass sometimes. For me as a musician, somebody who likes to cook and eat, who loves the sound of music, and don't forget there's a physical vibrational aspect of making music too. You feel the vibrations of the music coming through your body. I'm a sensory person, okay? And for me, Catholic Mass was amazing for somebody like me because there was the beautiful sight of all the beautiful ornate architecture inside of a Catholic church, the beautiful stained glass. Not that it's not present in other churches too, but also the smell of the incense and the sound of the chanting. It was magical for me, and it made me feel very close to the divine. And it still does. I still believe that's a way to connect with God. But I'm not a Catholic anymore. I was raised Catholic, and I went through my first communion and catechism and my first confession because my parents and my grandparents, it was their idea. And so I went and did that. I didn't have any problem with it. I didn't really know what was going on. But I did that because my family wanted me to. Around the time I started junior high, though, middle school, we call it junior high in Kingsburg. It's a cultural difference, I guess. I started attending the youth group at my local parish, the Catholic Church, Holy Family Roman Catholic Church. I started going to that youth group because I really wanted to. I had an interest in it. And I stayed interested through high school. I made my confirmation of my own choice, not because my parents had wanted me to. My parents had divorced and were not concerned really with those kinds of things. They had other larger fish in our family life that they were trying to fry. And my Catholic faith was so deep and so rich and so sure. When I was a senior in high school, I spent a few nights really wide awake, bloodshot eyes staring at the ceiling, unable to fall asleep because I couldn't decide if I wanted to go to music college or seminary to become a priest. And I thought very, very seriously about becoming a priest, and it brought me to tears sometimes because I felt like I had to choose between two great loves of my life, my Catholic faith and my love for music. Ultimately, I went with music. I told myself I would still be able to minister with a life of music, right? I could still be in ministry as a musician, and I could write music for the glory of God and sing for the glory of God. So I went to music school. And when I left Kingsburg for Creston, Iowa, here's an aside. Yesterday we celebrated the life of our beautiful friend Lou Parks, and she was pastor at a UCC like 10 miles away from this tiny town in Creston, Iowa, where I went to music school. So I left Kingsburg, California, and I went halfway across the country to a music school in Union County, Iowa, and little did I think Lou Parks was there at that time. And now, isn't that something? So anyway, when I went to the fields out in Iowa for music school, and that was the beginning of a pretty important series of events in my spiritual life, in my life generally. A huge majority of what I know about music and the skills that I've acquired as a musician, I learned at that college. But there were other things happening outside of my musical education that were absolutely life-changing for me. For the first time in my life, I was far away from home, over 1,000 miles away from my church, from my friends, and I had surrounded myself with good Christians. And we all agreed on everything in matters of faith. But suddenly I found myself in the middle of rural Iowa, and I was not surrounded by a lot of Catholic or Christian kids my age. In fact, they were a lot of very decidedly non-Christian people, people who had been raised by non-Christians, people who were taught things about the church and the Christian faith that were new to me. And they were taught to think a certain way about Christianity that, again, I had never been exposed to those ways of thinking about the Christian faith before. And so I wasn't surrounded by this echo chamber. I wasn't surrounded by this Catholic safety net where if opposing viewpoints came into my mind, there was nobody that I could go to reassure me, EJ, don't worry about it. We've got it all. We understand the truth. And you don't have to concern yourselves with points of view or realities that run counter to what we know to be true. And I met a lot of people with a lot of different viewpoints, and pretty quickly, I found myself carrying a lot of cognitive dissonance. I was meeting a lot of gay people. I was meeting a lot of Muslims and people who were of the Jewish faith, people who were atheists, people who maybe dabbled in what they referred to as Satanism. And I'm not saying that I'm just telling you, I was around a lot of new kind of people. Music school, jazz music school. and my classmates were just not, they didn't see the world the way that I did. But they were good people as far as I could tell. Probably even better than me in a lot of ways. Definitely better than some of the priests I had met. And so this cognitive dissonance, it began growing inside of me. How could I, because I had been taught that these people would be going somewhere in the afterlife that I didn't want to go. In fact, I had been taught that maybe if they were just a little bit bad, but still kind of good, maybe there was even a place called purgatory where they could go after death, where they could, right, it's a spiritual car wash, where God's C students can go to turn in late assignments, and maybe be allowed into heaven after some time there. Who knows how many? Like a lifetime, 3 lifetimes, who knows? But I had been taught these things about sin and mortality and the afterlife. And so meeting these people and being confronted with different ways of seeing the world and different ways of understanding the divine and God, the cognitive dissonance was undeniable, and it was frustrating to me. How do I proceed here? I'm in conversations with these people, and they're not aggravated, but they are spirited, and we're debating God and God's existence and faith and the church, and they're just kicking my butt, making some really good, logical, rational points, and I didn't know how to respond except to say that that's a really good point. I believe God is there, and I'm just going to continue with that. But that was the beginning of a very long deterioration of confidence in my faith, and it made me depressed. I would say that at this time in my life, I was depressed and tired and sick, and it sent me on a downward and inward spiral that it left me reeling. And I was low on energy, mental energy, spiritual energy, physical energy. A few more years later, I was back home in California. It was recession time, and the California State University system were taking like a fraction of the amount of transfers that they usually would from community colleges, right? So I'd applied to CSU Fresno, Sacramento, and Long Beach, and the music departments there wanted me to come and transfer and be their student, but the university said, we just don't have the money to educate the number of students we normally do right now. It was like 2010, okay? So I went to Fresno City College and Reedley College for a number of years because, they said, go to Reedley College and get your undergrad done or your lower level units. And so that's what I did, and I took a great philosophy class there. I can't remember the name of the professor. He looked like your typical picture of Jesus in Europe, right? Like the long hair, blue eyes, just tall, just absolutely regal guy. And he taught a class called Logic, and I loved the class. And he and I had a couple of great conversations. And I was listening to a lot of Steely Dan at the time, and I was feeling very existential. And this was just a few years after this downward spiral of faith had begun for me. And I found myself gradually getting closer to admitting that God is not there. God, it's the figment of your imagination. And I was on this long journey to finally admitting this reality, the non-existence of God or the divine. And I'm in this class, and I'm really in this weird existential place, and I remember leaving a discussion with him, and I'm not saying that my discussions with this professor led me to this. I'm just telling you that I was really going through a major paradigm shift in the way I saw the world at this time. And I'm walking through Reedley College, and it's a beautiful day, and I looked up at the sky, and I just said, God does not exist. And I said it again, and I said it again, and I felt so good. I felt so free. I felt liberated, unshackled even. But it took a long time to feel liberated in that. I spent a lot of years in this dark place before that. It makes me think of the Psalms. I said, I will keep watch over my ways so that I do not sin with my tongue. I will keep watch over my mouth as with a muzzle while the wicked are in my presence. I was mute and silent. I refused to say even something good. And my pain was stirred up. My heart was hot within me. While I was musing, the fire burned. Then I spoke with my tongue. Lord, let me know my end. And what is the extent of my days? Let me know how transient I am. Behold, you have made my days like handwidths, and my lifetime as nothing in your sight. Certainly all mankind standing is a mere breath. Certainly every person walks around as a fleeting shadow. They certainly make an uproar for nothing. He amasses riches and does not know who will gather them. And this is where I was. And this is where I was, crying out to God, just thinking, you know what, like, I'm really not feeling the love, so I maybe you're not there. And admitting to myself and to the universe that God does not exist was my way of escaping that darkness. And I did feel like I had freed myself, like I was liberated, like I was unshackled. But God has a funny way of calling you back. And once you believed in God, even for a moment, there's really not any going back, really. I want to stop here and just talk about my relationship with my lovely wife here. When we got engaged, lots of people wanted to offer us reading material and watching material for how to have a good marriage and what love is and how to make it last. And one of the things you hear a lot is that love is a choice, and you choose every day. And in the course of our relationship, Aaron, we have reflected on this a lot. Before we were engaged, there were maybe 2 or 3 pivotal moments in our relationship where we could have broken up. Maybe even that's the direction the signs were pointing. And so we ask ourselves, the 2 of us, should we do that? Should we go our separate ways? This has been great. we made the choice to keep going anyway. So that's what I take it to mean when I hear love is a decision, love is a choice. And what I want to get to is that faith is the same thing, right? And that faith is the same thing as love when we're talking about our relationship with God. A few years after this existential moment, when I was a student at Reedley College and having all these weird existential moments in my life, I'm ready to transfer, but the state universities still aren't taking a lot of transfers. They still want me to get like 12 more units at Reedley or Fresno City College. And I meet Dr. Zachary Durlam from Fresno Pacific University, and he says, we're not a state college, we're a private school. You can come right now, EJ. We're ready to take you now. And I had no interest in going to a Christian university. I didn't want that. Okay, I was not interested in it. Something else had happened just a couple of years before that. A friend of mine, her name was Katie Ingstrom. She was a lovely musician, and she played piano at this church, and she met a guy, and he moved to Denmark, and she wanted to go with him. And so she said, EJ, I think you would be good on the piano at this church. And I said, yeah, I'm not really interested in that. I don't want to go to a church. But they were going to pay me money to play the piano. So I said yes. And I've been here now for a long time. But so I'm in this church. I was suddenly at this church I didn't really have any interest in being in. And I was going to a university I didn't really have any interest in attending. And they were both spiritual, organizations. I'm whatever, I want to get paid and I want to get my degree, so let's do it. Let's rock and roll, right? I'm ready to do it. And I walked in with my eyes rolling to both of these things, right? The church and the university. And around this time, I also met Aaron, just so you know. God is moving in my life at this time, as you can see. So already God is kind of like, it's me again. And over the course of, over years of attending classes at FPU and hearing sermons from Chris Breedlove and Ara Gakazian and a number of other wonderful pastors, and Julia Pennerzook, of course. Back in those days, it was Chris. Some of you remember Chris Breedlove. And I was introduced to concepts and perspectives on Jesus and on God, and on the nature of faith and the church and its role in the world that I had never been introduced to. And I kept hearing about a program specifically at this church called Living the Questions. And what it was for was people who are coming into church with a lot of doubts about church and a lot of really challenging questions they have about what is God, who is God, what was Jesus. When I pray, is anybody listening? And so Living the Questions was a ministry. I think, is it still a ministry here? It is a ministry where you can come and ask those questions and have discussions about it that are meant to affirm the doubts that you're having as naturally occurring and as good and as a part of a complete faith life. And over time, I found myself hearing that knock on the door from God just more loudly and more insistently over time. And I found myself wanting to be close to God. I want to go back for just a minute and say that in this period of my life, when I was sure that God wasn't there, and that I had admitted finally and freed myself from this idea of God and said, God does not exist, I was still praying in those days. Even though I was convinced nobody was hearing the prayers. I told myself it was a good practice, right? It was a good way to practice mindfulness and to practice gratitude on a daily basis. I tried to do it before every meal, even though I didn't think God was there and God was kind of lame. I just thought, let me pray, let me continue to pray, because I think it's a good spiritual practice, whatever that meant, right? At the time, I was kind of rolling my eyes even at that notion. But that's what I told myself. Looking back, maybe I had admitted that God wasn't there, but I really hoped that He was. I don't know. I'm reflecting on that now. But I want you to know that even during those times when I was sure of God's non-existence, I was still praying. And over the years that I was attending church here and going to classes at Fresno Pacific and falling in love, started to feel maybe like somebody really was listening again. And so I never stopped praying. But eventually this feeling came back to me. And today I'm happy to feel that. I'm happy to continue praying, just knowing that it's like Schrodinger's God, huh? God exists if you believe God exists. God doesn't exist if you don't believe God exists. Are you familiar with Schrodinger's cat? The cat is in a box. You're going to open the box and find out if there's actually a cat in there. But until you open the box and know, the cat exists and does not exist at the same time. Faith is like Schrodinger's cat, except you've got a privileged position in that you know that the cat is in that box. That truth has already been revealed to you. And so while somebody may make the case like, hey, until you open that box and confirm that God is in there, you really don't know. You could say, okay, yeah, that's reasonable, I get that. I'm rolling with the cat is in the box. I'm rolling with that. I'm choosing that today. I'm choosing God again today. I don't know if God's listening, but I'm praying again today. I don't know if God's up there to receive my gratitude, but I'm thankful to God today. And it's also this idea of deconstruction, right? When we look at the world analytically and try to understand the cosmos scientifically, there's always a physical and cosmic explanation, right? We can boil it down to physics and science to explain the nature of the universe and how everything was created. But if you are considering the existence of the divine, you are considering the existence of something or someone that would transcend all of that anyway. So faith for me is a choice, just like love. I'm choosing to have this faith in God today. I know that you are rational people, and people will come to us with rational arguments about why God does not exist, and why science disproves any divine aspect to the cosmos. And you can look at that person and say, I completely understand that. And I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm choosing God. And why would I do that? It's because God's not going to leave you alone either. God's going to come knocking on your door, whether you want God to or not. Having faith means that you are open and receptive to that call, and that when it comes, you'll explore it. We live in a world of a lot of change. Change is always happening, but given technological advances, the pace of change in our day is more rapid than it has ever been in human history. And paradigms are changing all over the place. In the way we structure our governments and our societies, our economies are changing, borders are moving. Ideas of what is morally right and what is morally wrong are evolving. And for that reason, I think that our church has to adapt as well. There are lots of ideas of what the future church should look like, not just our ministry, but the great big worldwide church. As these paradigms change, people are going to continue to come to our ministry because we serve a special need in our community to welcome people who are experiencing doubt and disbelief. It is important that there be a ministry, that it is important that there be a church in our community where people who are confronting doubt and disbelief, maybe for the first time, have a place where they can come to confront those things. And it's important that they have a place to do that. Jesus went through it. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane said, God, I really don't want to do this. I'm not really sure that I'm the right guy for this. Can I get out of this crucifixion thing? I'd really rather not. He said that. Jesus also, if we're to believe what's in the Gospels, went into the desert to be tempted by the devil, evil itself. And in doing this, maybe, Bible scholars will tell you that it's written that way because Jesus was trying to satisfy prophecy so that he could fulfill his mission. And maybe that's true, but in doing so, in allowing himself into the desert to go toe-to-toe with the devil, Jesus tells us and demonstrates us that we shouldn't be afraid to do the same. To go toe-to-toe with the abyss. With doubt and with disbelief, get in the ring with it. And in fact, in that darkness, you just might find the light that you've been looking for. Amen.